All right, guys, this is a recording for animation class where we're starting the bouncing ball project. The goal of this project is to create a bouncing ball animation where it is a step-by-step animation or frame-by-frame animation. And this is what it'll kind of look like. All right, and so the basic goal, the first step is going to be the animation part. So let me show you how we're going to start that. If you open up Animator, this is the screen that you should probably be seeing. You want to create a new file. You want this to be 640 by 480, and the only reason we're starting with that is so that we could start off with a small file. Now, the one thing you do have to change is the frame rate. Mine is set at 24. Yours might be set higher. You want to set it to 24 frames per second, or excuse me, or 24 frame rate. And then we're going to create. And this is going to give us a stage here, and this is what's called the stage. This is where all our animation is going to be. You want to keep it big enough so you could basically see every part of your stage. And then we're going to have a couple of things down here that we'll explain as we go. But mainly, this is your play button, rewind, and forward, and loop button. Some of these we'll leave for later. But here's your timeline. Now, if now this timeline looks pretty big, you can see these squares. You can actually use this to make them smaller or bigger. I would advise to make them smaller. That way that you could see as much of your timeline as possible. And then obviously, let me raise this up. You're going to have layers. Layers are going to be really, really important, except for this project. For now, we're just going to be using one layer at a time. We might use a second one in case you want to figure out your animation. But we're going to have mainly work on one layer. You get to add layers and remove layers. And this aspect, there's a folder unless you want to organize your layers. That's mainly for multiple layers. There's a garbage for deleting layers. There's an eye here in case you don't want to see a layer. So if you click this, whatever's on this layer will disappear. You could also click the layer and it'll show you that that layer is not visible. And there's also lock layers, so you could actually lock your layers. We're going to be doing, so you're really not going to worry too much about time. We're going to worry more about frames. And remember, we chose 24 frames. And if you see right next to 24, it says frames FPS, which is frames per second. What we are going to be doing is animating on the twos. Now, animating on the twos will allow you to only design 12 frames per second instead of one frame per instead of 24 frames per second, which means you need 24 separate drawings. We're going to be needing 12 frames per drawings. That's why we're animating on the twos. Now, before we start, uh, we said we're going to animate on the twos. So here's 2 frames. What we're going to be doing is you're going to be creating a what's called a keyframe. So you have 3 options. You could insert a keyframe, a blank frame, a blank keyframe, and a frame. Now, all 3 things do something slightly different. So we're going to insert you could right now for the first one, you can insert either or, but I'm going to insert a keyframe just because of out of habit that you see that there is an actual keyframe. And I want to make sure we're going to do a standard view. So this is the standard view. Now, so we have a frame here, a blank keyframe. And the way you could know this, if I move this over, you could see that there's a circle and it's not solid, it's empty. So that's just a regular blank frame. Now, the reason it's blank is there's nothing in it. So let's say we start our ball design or a bouncing ball, and we're going to add this circle. And we could start at the very top because this ball is going to drop. It's going to bounce 3 times and then go from there. And if you noticed, the circle inside this frame all of a sudden turns solid. And that's because every keyframe has something in it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert a frame. Because remember, we are designing on the twos. Now, you could design every two, literally on the twos, by skipping a frame and then adding the keyframe here. We're just going to design every 2 frames. So now we're going to have this ball move. To start an initial first move, we got to insert another keyframe. So insert a keyframe. Now, if you notice, when you insert a keyframe, the ball is solid, the circle is solid. That means there's something there. Not just this one, but there's something also here. When you insert a keyframe, it automatically copies the last keyframe. So now, if I go here and I select this ball and move it, notice that if I go back, here's one ball, here's another one. Now they have moved. Now, if you want to be able to see both keyframes at the same time so you could understand what's going on, this is where we're going to learn our first button here. It's called onion skin. And what you see here is 2 balls, which makes you know that you'll be able to see the last one and the next one at the same time. And if I click it, you get these 2 lines at the very top. Now, if you notice, if I move this over, you only see 1 ball. And if I move the blue line to the left, now you see both. It's letting you see both keyframes at the same time. So now you're starting to see the movement. Now, like the one I did before, I'm going to insert a frame. And a frame is just a continuance of what's already there. So if you select a frame, you're going to see the same ball. Now, if you try to move the ball in the frame, it's not going to do anything. All it's saying is that the image from this keyframe is going to occupy 2 frames. Right? So we got the first one, we got the second one. Now we're going to insert another keyframe and we're going to continue this animation. But just so that we save time, you can notice where it says insert frame, F5. So guess what I'm going to do? I'm just going to click F5 at the top of the keyboard. Now I have 3. And I'm going to move this one down and to the right. So now we have 3. 1, 2, and 3. And you just keep going. Control, insert keyframe, move it down and to the right. You want some space. You want the space to be similar. And then F5. So now I go back and here's the movement of the ball. And that's how you start your animation. And all you're doing is continuing down, inserting keyframes, inserting a frame, and moving the ball down. And if you want to see what this looks like, I'm going to take off the onion skin and I'm going to press play. And I'm going to press this one for loop. So now you notice that I pressed loop and this blue bar came up. You want to make sure that you choose to play the whole thing. You got to stretch it out so it covers the whole animation. Now if I press play, here's the ball falling. If you like the way that looks, then you're doing the right amount of spacing and just keep going. Insert another keyframe. Insert another frame. And move it down, same amount of space. And then you'll see that the animation continues. And that's basically it. You just continue as you go. When you hit the bottom, it bounces back up. Just keep going until you get the 3 bounces.